Keynes, who was in his late 40s, was his only son. He had 4 daughters who were young and uninterested in the family business. Keynes saw Lusaka as affordable labor, but that did not bother Lusaka at all. Lusaka saw an opportunity to bring Mamiwata's idea to life. Throughout this time, Lusaka reminded himself to keep his dignity intact and earn Keynes' respect and trust while doing so. Keynes and the family were kind people, but Lusaka noticed that Keynes always referred to what he had seen on television when he spoke of Alkebulan. He realized that he had to change the perception Keynes had picked up. Keynes mentioned in passing that he was building a house for his family, and quickly, Lusaka told him about the cleaning business he had. Chapter 15. Chrysalis. The hardened case of a pupa opens up to see more shelter. Though a place with changing faces, aimlessly waiting for greatness. Fly and achieve, butterfly, fly. Lusaka and the voice had developed a stronger relationship. To keep that bond growing and be in touch with the voice, Lusaka made use of any free time he had. In between traveling to and from jobs, including the times he worked outside, he either read something or listened to motivational talks. Having sold his car to save up, Lusaka found comfort in using public transport. He developed a love for reading and would often spend his public transport journeys lost in a book. He would often notice how people looked at him. Most seemed shocked, while others would pass a comment about the books he read. A small fire had lit up inside Lusaka, from not having an interest in reading to making sure he had something to read whenever he was on the train or bus or simply at home. Lusaka learned a lot of important lessons while gardening with Freetown. Freetown loved gardening. His garden was always green and full of fruits and vegetables all year round. They talked about life, and Lusaka would always return with more questions to ask Freetown every time they met up to work in the garden. Freetown had a few round mustard seeds he wanted to plant, so they prepared the soil. "You see how small these seeds are?" Freetown turned to Lusaka. "Give them a few weeks and you will see. Once the seeds are in the soil, the real job will start. The seeds will need to be watered non-stop for weeks before anything will show up, and if we stop, the seeds will die in the ground." Weeks passed by, and one after another, the seeds started breaking ground. They continued to grow, and Freetown was able to harvest vegetables nearly 3 times a week. After several months, Freetown showed Lusaka the mustard seed. Can you believe that that small seed has turned out to be this big plant? And before he could continue his thought, someone came looking for him. Once again, Lusaka realized it was the word of the voice. A few weeks later, Lusaka visited Freetown and found that his administrative assistant had brought in a box of books he was giving out for free. He spotted a book on the art of motivating a group of people to act towards achieving a common goal by an author named Sydney, and just from the title, he knew he had to read it. After a few other people looked through the box and picked what they wanted, all but 2 books were left, the one Lusaka wanted and another one. On opening the first few pages in the book, Lusaka was convinced that it was sent by the voice to cement his thoughts on all the prominent people he had read about. Once again, he realized it was not by his doing that he received that book at the right time and moment. Sydney confirmed Lusaka's thoughts on all the outstanding leaders whom he had admired and looked up to. These people were those who went to do great things for humanity and inspired millions of people during their lifetime and long after they had gone. Lusaka concluded that to make a lasting change or lead any project, be it an organization or people, one needs to lead himself first. He first had to know who he was, meaning everything started and ended with himself. After completing reading the book for the second time, Lusaka sent Sydney a thank you note for the awakening and the information he had brought into his life. A few days later, Sydney replied, inviting Lusaka to be one of the first students to attend a class on finding a mission for one's life based on the book's teachings. This was a dream come true for Lusaka and an opportunity he could not resist. Lusaka had always believed that people were natural-born leaders and that all those who did extraordinary things had some special gift he lacked. Sydney convinced him to think that there was no such thing as a natural-born leader. He explained that every person was a leader in their own capacity. He added that leadership was not all about character, but that leadership was a character, and no one could separate the two. For a leader, seeing gave birth to a mission that translated into action, and we can find our life's purpose by looking at our life stories. You could see it among those things you love. Lusaka continued studying and learning from as many people as he could. His gem group and Mami Water idea had yet to see investment or interest from others. Still, the voice reminded him to open his heart and ears to every book and teacher who presented themselves to him. Allow your soul to understand them. May you keep them in your heart of hearts, and if you lead your life with their words in your heart, you will succeed. Lusaka's curiosity and lack of belief in his abilities became the main traveling force in his search to understand why many others and himself were not getting what they wanted. In contrast, others had more than enough for themselves, their families, and many more generations to come. Lusaka continued studying and learning from as many people as he could. His gem group and Mami Water idea had yet to see investment or interest from others. Still, the voice reminded him to open his heart and ears to every book and teacher who presented themselves to him. Allow your soul to understand them. May you keep them in your heart of hearts, and if you lead your life with their words in your heart, you will succeed. This time was not a time to feel sorry for himself. Lusaka had to be healthy for Cairo, so he decided not to share everything he was going through with her. Lusaka did not want to kill Cairo's spirit and energy because her optimism made him push himself.
This is African
Taking
lo-fi.
evening walks became the best way to deal with a few things in his mind, empty them, and cleanse them. One day, he was walking with his headset on with no music playing, as it helped reduce outside noise and allowed him to be alone with his thoughts. After a walk of complaining and victimizing himself, he wondered what he was doing wrong and how he could fix it. On his way back, Lusaka came across a newly opened phone box. He thought himself lucky. This is a blessing. He was long overdue for a new phone. He reached down and picked up the box with delight, but once he opened it, he found nothing but a small user handbook inside. He threw the box away without thinking, but kept the booklet as he unfolded it to look at what they said about the product. The manual said who the phone manufacturers were. The manufacturer stood by the product and believed if you followed what they had told you to do, you would be happy with the product and promised to repair or replace it within a specified period. Wow, Lusaka thought to himself, admiring their confidence in what they had created. They must know what they are doing. He thought to himself that a question came from a small voice in the distance in the silence of walking. What about you then? If this is just a thing made by man, don't you think the same applies to you? After a few months of working, Lusaka had made small steps toward finding people who could help him. With the little gold coins he could find, he could hire a professional to help him with whatever task he could and pay him only for a few hours, making the workload easy. A few months later, Lusaka believed the solution would work and named it copper bullets. Later, Lusaka received news that the TED 801s had once again attacked people in his community, affecting nearly 5,000 people. By the time the warnings started being sent out, the TED 801s had spread quickly, causing schools, churches, and all public gatherings to be cancelled. To make things worse, he received a message from Wense about how his cousin was one victim. He got medical attention on time and made it out alive. This started putting pressure on Lusaka, blaming himself, feeling it was his fight. He got those people killed. If he had delivered the solution on time, even one life would have been worth saving. Regardless of what was going on, he was even more eager to assist in possible incidents like that. At the same time, among the 300 people he had contacted to inquire about helping to bring the copper bullets to life, one by one, they began calling back, asking for them, but they were not yet ready. Yet the thought of having someone drink Mami Water, free of TED 801s, would mean they would have the physical strength and good health as they become better versions of themselves. This brought joy, inspiration, and motivation to Lusaka, and thought it would help many others who use it. Using the disaster news he received to show Totem Island's people the problem he was trying to solve, helped him get sympathy. They saw the importance of the copper bullets, and people took Lusaka a little more serious. A few weeks later, Keynes asked Lusaka to do some work at one of their old yards over an hour out of town. There was no house in the yard, only a few shipping containers full of unused equipment, a portable toilet, and a generator. For nearly 3 weeks, working on the yard meant spending almost 8 hours to himself, which he enjoyed, as he was killing 2 birds with one stone. using it to save up to bring the copper bullets to life and work on himself. Looking back on everything he had learned and was still learning, he thought of now answering some questions he had and thinking about everything he had been learning, reading and observing. Lusaka still wondered who was the creator and where does he live? I am who I am, the voice reminded Lusaka of the creator's answer. I think I know him, Lusaka responded. Isn't he in heaven, a special place of milk and honey reserved for those who are completely submitted themselves to the authority of the gods? Anyone who fell short of this went to a pool of fire. So, where is this heaven? The voice asked. Trying to locate a place but could not find one, the voice added, aren't you told that the kingdom of heaven is within you? Thinking back to the phone case and the handbook he had found a few weeks ago, and adding together the knowledge he had gained from his father, mother and grandparents, he was convinced he was created in the image of something bigger than him. Lusaka thought, if I was created by the image of someone bigger than me, not like him but in his image, this means he's in me. Lusaka thought for a second, then he must be with me every second of the day. Immediately thinking back to the voice, looking back at how good it had been to him, always pointing him in the right direction, and promised never to leave him, and nothing was impossible for it. For a moment, Lusaka felt a sense of joy and uplifting, asking himself again, does that mean that I am whatever I say I am, since with my creator, nothing is impossible? Usually, just like that phone, he must have created a set of guidelines on how he and the people of Alkebulan would change their lives if they wanted. This could change many people's lives, Lusaka thought. In the following days, as Lusaka continued to work, the conversation in his mind thought back to the question he had when he first arrived on Totem Island, on how come their buildings stood for many years and withstood many storms and rains. Even the houses did the same. And by this time on Totem Island, construction was at its peak with buildings as high as 40 floors were built. Reflecting on his lessons of knowing oneself to lead oneself and anything, Lusaka thought, what if the same principles applied to make any changes? He wanted to build a building or a house that would stand the test of time. For everyone that had changed anything, Lusaka observed that they had a strong sense of self-confidence and had faith in something bigger than them. They did not rely on anyone or their powers alone, but did all they could and left everything else in that something bigger than them. Some called it different names, some called it the universe, but for Lusaka, he believed this very thing was the creator. By this time, he was very convinced there was a strong connection between the creator and the voice. The creator and I are one, but the creator is greater than I, the voice said. Lusaka decided to call the voice Muzo based on the stories he heard when he was young. Muzo told Lusaka, now you are spiritually circumcised. Chapter 16. Butterfly. The time has come to rise, the night has come to fly. So colorful, so glorious, so wonderful, so victorious. Rise and fly, pretty butterfly. In the world of uncertainty, with all the problems Lusaka's world faced, almost everything was like constructing a house on a rock or deep muddy water to make the building or individual stronger. Thinking back to the time Lusaka was young, when he and his grandfather went to the nearby river to water their vegetable garden in the dry season, as they walked, Lusaka noticed an enormous tree with green and healthy leaves. Yet the other trees were drying out, and Lusaka asked his grandfather how come it was like that. The grandfather said it was because its roots are deep enough to reach the muddy water from the river. Lusaka's second thing was for one to have the right values and a proper belief system. He saw this as an essential element for one to have a stronger foundation. These would act as pillars from underneath, holding the house or person together. From what Lusaka learned of values, there were all those things one believed to be vital to him or her. They made Lusaka who he was. They set the foundation for why he did things and what he did. If values are that important, he thought, then living and continuously unaware of one's values is like building a house in the rocks with no support. It will surely not withstand the wind when it blows. Thinking back to his story, he heard of a young man looking for acceptance from his friends and feeling that he needed to do everything the friends asked of him to be accepted. Such a person went against his values and still ended up not being accepted. Lusaka thought he could feel accepted if he did not accept himself and align all his actions to his values. He noticed he could only become valuable to his family, community, and country if he were true to himself and who he was. He realized true happiness, acceptance, respect, and love only came when he accepted them first. Like in any construction, the pillars in the ground made a good starting point for building Lusaka's mental and moral qualities. Having come to a first world island from a third world island, Lusaka knew he had a great deal to learn about his personal judgment and that which he utilized to understand others. He was accustomed to judging himself and others based on the car, profession, color of their skin, how well they spoke, how much gold coins they had, how famous they were, how educated, and many other things he did not see in himself, hardly paying attention to their values and character. During the time Lusaka was learning from Sydney, he and his various teachers had talked about the importance of values. Lusaka had set rules on how he would govern himself and how he would strive to have them. The ability to make the right decisions and look forward, the ability to stay the course and resist pressures of all kinds, capacity to subordinate passions to the spirit and fulfillment of the mission at hand, capacity to give every individual his due, capacity to strive for great things, to challenge oneself, himself and others, the ability to overcome selfishness and serve others habitually, ability to guide by example and respect others. Lusaka had understood that character did not call for perfection, but merely having the ability to strive for extraordinary things and challenge oneself and others. An excellent character takes time to build and small steps to develop. Moral character is to be praised more than outstanding talent. Most talents are, to some extent, gifts. Lusaka also understood that the right attitude, in contrast, was not given to him. Lusaka's job was to build it piece by piece through his thoughts, choices, and daily displays of courage and determination. Just as no weather building can be erected on a weak foundation, so can a lasting reputation of respect not be built on an invalid character. Lusaka realized that his beliefs were also an important foundation in his life. The things that one believed to be true of himself and the world around his subconscious mind affected every action. He noticed that one's opinions were a powerful unseen force that drove each person's behavior and they responded to their surroundings. Lusaka understood how vital this force was. He formed his beliefs based on the information he was exposed to, which included what people said to him, especially those he respected, what he heard on the news, what he listened to, and any other external forces he was exposed to. He noticed how powerful his mind was and how it worked. It was more focused on the pressures of life and often shielded him from pain, but it was still under his command. It did whatever it was asked to do. The mind also read the pictures and words Lusaka used to describe himself and his future. It brought everything to life. Lusaka decided that only the positive would be allowed in his belief system by continually reminding himself, I am greatness, I am destined for more. I am the north, I am the south, I am the east, I am the west, I am the master of the universe. Muzo spoke, whatever you believe to be true of yourself, you shall become. That is why the Book of Wisdom reminds you to let the weak say, I am strong, and the poor say, I am rich. Lusaka remained silent. Let me ask you one thing, Muzo continued. Now that we have come to the realization that in the beginning was the Word, who was with the Word? The Creator, Lusaka answered. And so the Word and the Creator are one. Muzo paused and asked, now who does the Creator tell you he is? The Creator says, I am who I am, Lusaka answered. With that, Muzo told Lusaka to choose wisely the words he used to describe himself, his problems, and others. In constructing a house or any building, once the foundation is set up and tested for security and stability, the second stage is to lay a slab on which the building's walls will rest. Lusaka observed the direct relationship between the depth of a building's foundation, its size and height. Just like me, he thought, it is only after I know who I am, what I stand for, and what I believe in that I can now choose what to build on the foundation I have dug. Lusaka understood that his purpose would flower after all the learning he has done. It is a way of giving thanks for what was given to him. He understood that his purpose was a way to let his light shine before others, so they may see his good works and give glory to the Creator. He knew that all his efforts and courage are useless if he did not have a purpose. Muzo had been a quiet force of change in Lusaka's life. Did you know that your ancestors believed that the Creator created sight for the eyes, sound for the ears, and breath for the nose? These three organs carry the ability for you to become aware of changes in your external environment. It sends senses straight to the heart. Lusaka listened to Muzo, who continued, "It is because of the heart that all knowledge exists, and language plans what the heart understands. In this way, all creative powers come into existence, non-being and being. Every word reveals itself in the secret thoughts of the heart and how you speak. All things are created thanks to the word." Lusaka had little understanding of what his ancestors believed in, and although he had found some truth in Muzo's statement, it still left him wondering what it meant. A few weeks later, Lusaka and Cairo went to a friend's house for a get-together. Upon arriving at the house, Lusaka met an old friend of his. He stretched his hand for a handshake as he observed his old friend. He could tell he too was a student of the School of Mystery and was on a journey. The two spent all afternoon deep in conversation, sharing thoughts of their worldviews and their determination to become better versions of themselves. Before Lusaka left the party, his friend made a statement that caught his attention. "You see, the problem today is that we have completely ignored the connection between a healthy diet, exercise, and personal development. A diet is not limited to the food we eat, but what we watch, listen to, read, and the people we hang out with." The friend explained that we require a healthy body and mind to be the best version of ourselves. We do not eat food without the knowledge of which body part it serves. Instead, the digestive system converts food to pure form of energy transported throughout the body. Each system in our body converts the food we digest into a different form of energy that feeds a different part of our bodies. The most refined and most perfect energy is sexual energy. It results from all the processes that occur from digestion. Lusaka was intrigued. He agreed that sexual energy is a creative force behind all that exists. It is why half-naked women are used in almost all commercials and television ads. So if the food we ingest goes to make up our organs, it is imperative to eat healthy to maintain a healthy heart. The heart is not only responsible for purifying and circulating blood, but our emotions. If our emotions are out of whack, then our thoughts will be negatively affected. And we already know that our thoughts create our reality. Therefore, a healthy heart equals a healthy brain. Thus, one can control feelings and thoughts much easier. What we eat, the air we breathe, the thoughts and feelings we entertain, and the behaviors we engage in at our will is the critical factor. Lusaka looked at his friend with intrigue. "I will call you Professor Black from now on," he smiled. "Like our ancestors used to say, only iron sharpens iron, and it is for us to find some time to sharpen ourselves." From that day, the two started meeting regularly. Lusaka came to understand that finding his life purpose was a big task. It would change how he thought, acted, and lived. To see his purpose, he had to reach out to the one thing that would give him an idea of what was expected of him. Thinking back to his past and all the new information he had come to know, finding his purpose required him to answer the 5 questions Muzo and many of the leaders had brought to him. Lusaka believed for sure that his purpose was the reason he was still alive. He came to the island to discover who he was and to become the change he wanted to see for his people. He wanted to help his people become better versions of themselves and to uplift them. Lusaka dreamt of a more productive future so they could become masters of their destinies and go about fulfilling part of their reason for their creation and light a new flame in them. Once he discovered his purpose, Lusaka paid attention to those things that mattered the most to him. It had been one of the most excellent benefits of him knowing his purpose. He became even more passionate about life, which also motivated him to move his life forward and push through in rough times as he listened to Muzo. Before Lusaka understood what purpose was and its importance in one's life, he lived a life of rushing, stress, and worrying about things he has no control over. Lusaka noticed that once he decided on his purpose, he started valuing his time more. he became more stable and made better decisions. Lusaka had come to an understanding that knowing his purpose was a lifetime process. It required his investment in himself in the way he thought, the actions he took, and how he planned for his future. Without a purpose, he can wander around the world without a stated direction and play at life without accomplishing anything of significance or meaning. All the great teachers he had learned from or admired had a strong sense of purpose. After a firm foundation is laid, the columns and beams are put into place. With a strong foundation and superstructure in place, a building can reach great heights. Lusaka used the building's construction to build a stronger self, and he must use his thoughts as walls to hold up the building and its roof. He recalled how many of the influential people he had learned from spoke significantly about the power of one's thoughts. He also recalled that Muzo warned him always to keep his thoughts in check. Lusaka thought about the two parts of the brain Maputo had mentioned to him. The subconscious mind is a compelling force in which everything he focused on came to life, for it was the power to create anything it imagined or thought of. There is no cheating in the subconscious part of the mind. It was a system that does not discriminate. No one could manipulate or change. This system had existed since the beginning of time. Lusaka learned that the subconscious mind worked with it and followed the principles that guaranteed success. Thinking back to the mobile phone manufacturer's handbook he had picked up, this is also for us humans, he thought. It can only come from the creator I am. One's thoughts were divided into two parts, positive and negative thoughts. Whatever you focus on or feed attracts more of that. The more you think of it, the faster it comes to life. Lusaka wondered how he could keep track of his thoughts. He would ask himself only to feel demoralized. It is impossible, Lusaka thought. That is why I'm here. Muzo responded by taking Lusaka back to the conversation they had, where Muzo told Lusaka he knew everything about him. I'll send you two signs in every situation or thought you have to help you. One will make you feel good, uplifted and motivated, and one will make you feel worried and drained. Still, the choice is all up to you, Muzo explained. Muzo told Lusaka always to ask himself what-if questions, followed by something positive he wanted to happen, and feel how he could feel if it were true. Lusaka began to notice how life worked much better and to his advantage when he kept a positive attitude and focused more on the good instead of the negative. To this realization, Lusaka then came to look at his circumstances from a different point of view. In keeping a positive attitude, he had to look at all the challenges and problems he faced as a sign of life, trust, and opportunity to grow from the Creator. A positive attitude inspires affirmative action, which inspires positive results. Once he reached this conclusion, Lusaka noticed how he used to blame external factors for the circumstances he and people from Alkebulan experienced. Lusaka now understood what one teacher meant when he compared the human mind to a fertile farmer's field. A field will grow whatever is planted, success or failure. Every time you assume something positive or negative to be true of yourself, you fall pregnant, and soon enough, a child will be born to bear witness of the creation. After the walls of a building are erected, the roofing that will protect the building from external forces is laid. Everything from the foundation and the walls provides support for the roof to be stable. The stronger the foundation, the stronger the walls, and so the stronger the roofing. The roofing offers defense against wind, rain, heat, and many other elements which could protect him against the challenges he would have to navigate in life. For Lusaka to successfully fight through the journey and move through all the challenges, he had to have a clear vision and defined goals. He needed a clear direction of where he was going and what he wanted. He needed focus and determination to face any obstacle that came his way. Muzo reminded Lusaka of the importance of inner strength and accountability. Get a candle and a mirror, Muzo told Lusaka. Sit comfortably in front of the mirror, close your eyes, and empty your thoughts. Then slowly open your eyes while looking at the reflection in the mirror as if you're meeting that person for the first time. Lusaka did as Muzo told him. Once you've lit up the candle, look deep into the flame. Imagine that you are gaining the sound qualities of the red flame and it is burning all your inferior attributes. Muzo explained that the importance of this process was to remind oneself of the stages of life, birth and death, which one cannot control. One only has the power to control what is in between. and that is our breath. Chapter 17. Seed. These seeds will grow to be strong. Their peace will grow to be fond. A quietness during growth, a shyness, a silent soul. One day, this seed will be a tree. After months of working to save and buy the equipment, Lusaka finally brought the copper bullets to help eliminate TED 801. Lusaka sourced out and bought all the elements they needed to move from an idea on paper to having something physical. Everything arrived except for one crucial item. Among the things Lusaka had bought was a machine that combined all the elements into a fully visible and ready-to-use solution. Lusaka asked Cairo to import the product on his behalf to avoid raising too much suspicion after buying all the compounds and elements. He waited for a decision to be made. The system refused to hand Cairo the machine as it was a highly sought-after item by criminal groups involved in the manufacture of illicit drugs. Through Cairo, Lusaka tried to explain why and what they were doing, but they did not meet the standards, information, and licenses they were asked to provide. Lusaka once again fell on his face. After being so close and investing everything he had, he was met with a slap on the face. He felt disempowered and angry, not knowing how he was going to recover from the setback. You cannot rise. It is not surprising that fall. Persevere and you will rise. Remember, you're like a bird whose wings are caked with mud. Muzo always knew how to assure Lusaka that he was moving in the right direction. Personal efforts, small and constant, count. Shake off those natural tendencies, those vain fancies, that depression, that mud clinging to your wings, and you will see yourself free. If you persevere, you will rise. Do not try to think of how this or that will happen, said Muzo. Think of how you'd feel once someone had drunk Mami water, free of TED 801. Do all you can do and leave the rest to me. Lusaka had developed personal relationships with the suppliers of the compounds he needed. A few weeks later, high-speed rotating winds, the heavy rains and strong winds led to flash flooding, causing hundreds of deaths, destroying over 700 million gold coins in buildings, infrastructure and crops. It damaged or destroyed over 100,000 homes, affecting over 2.2 million people. To this news, Lusaka knew what it meant to people's Mami water sources. The floods presented a playing ground for the coils spreading quickly, giving them the power to cause more damage than the cyclone had created. But again, he could not help, and there was nothing he could do to help. Lusaka thought more people would die. He blamed no one but himself. Worried and confused about answering all the questions he was being asked by all the people he had shared the copper bullets with, they all said this was an excellent opportunity to put the copper bullets to work. Soon, the sad news of the floods would start to meet people's hearts who came to realize the great challenge that people faced. A clear vision of the smells the copper bullet would bring to the people came to him, and he slept, feeling how he would feel if everything had come true. Soon enough, opportunities and ideas that moved him close to his vision started presenting themselves to Lusaka. Weeks later, they completed the first stage of the copper bullets, and for the first time, Lusaka would hold them in his hands. It was one of the most exciting times for Lusaka, Cairo, his family and friends. Achieving this step was a great deal for Lusaka, as it meant more doors would open much more straightforwardly. He no longer had to explain too much about the copper bullets. To many, it seemed like not so much of a big deal, but to Lusaka, this meant the world. But he realized the copper bullets were not the most important thing he had achieved, but the person he had become. The following challenge Lusaka now had was to see how good the copper bullets were in fighting TED 801s. With the newly gained confidence, Lusaka would spend days after days knocking at the head office of the principal supplier of Mami water, who ran and managed the plant that killed TED 801s. Every time Lusaka went to the offices, he was repeatedly told someone would be in touch. Waiting, no one would call until Lusaka went to the offices one day. Still, this time, refused to leave till he talked to someone. Upon hearing about the copper bullets and Lusaka's plans, they were genuinely kind to help him with whatever he needed. They also permitted him to have access to one of their biggest TED 801 treatment plants that treated nearly over 180 million TED 801s a day. To truly see the effectiveness, they had to conduct a test on the mami water that contained TED 801s from human waste, then carry out a before and after test with the copper bullets. A specialized medical laboratory will perform the test. After collecting the samples, Lusaka had to hire special transport to take the samples because they had to reach the lab within 30 minutes. The mami water contained human waste, and so the samples had a foul smell. And with not having enough gold coins, Lusaka took it in his car. The lab results showed that there were over 10,000 TED 801s in the samples. The treatment resulted in no TED 801s being present. They carried this same process out in Alkebulan with similar findings. Upon these findings, Lusaka slowly started seeing how everyone, including his parents, Mwensi and father, started seeing the bigger picture and took Lusaka more seriously. He still hasn't completed his house's roof. Lusaka's building was not complete. Still, by this time, he had a firm idea of what he wanted and how he saw the future for himself, and how he could help the people of Alkebulan. Lusaka realized that if he wanted the idea to succeed, he needed to create a vehicle to move people from city to city, not only to make a profit, but to allow those without means to travel for free and those who can afford it to pay the full fare. Lusaka came to a belief that if he entirely discovered who he was and lived with purpose, he can spread his wings and achieve the impossible. Still, Muzo came to warn Lusaka that the Creator gives everything on earth, from the air you breathe to all the riches. Your only job is to look after riches interested in you and know how to get them without your neighbor's expense. Let not your confidence be in your heart to have riches. Do not let money be your focus, for he who was rich last year can be poor this year, said Muzo. Lusaka came to connect it to his father and uncle. Still, he learned a valuable lesson that forming the Global Empowers Group empowered the people around him and used entrepreneurial spirit to serve a higher purpose and let the financial benefits be the reward for fulfilling one's purpose, with a great understanding that Lusaka needed to be the change he wanted to see in his own families, community, and countries. Excited and feeling a sense of achievement, finally Lusaka would find peace within himself and his surroundings. Re-energized and motivated to carry on the newly discovered mission, he still had not come to a definite conclusion on Muzo. One thing he was most particular about was that there was a connection between the Creator and Muzo. Muzo was the only thing that connected Lusaka to the source, like plugging in straight to the power socket and not through an adapter, connecting pieces of equipment that cannot be in contact directly to the power socket. Lusaka noticed that the majority of people in both islands connected the equipment to an adapter. If the second person's adapter blew up, it meant there was no power flow to those connected to him by their status or material things they surrounded themselves with. But why not connect straight to the socket if we're all capable of doing it? Lusaka questioned himself. Lusaka thought Muzo operated similarly, and it convinced him to look back at the times when he listened to his suggestion. The outstanding teachers also taught him how to connect to Muzo, strengthen its voice, stay connected to it, listen to its advice, and keep the power flowing cautiously to influence the rest of the body. The thing he had noticed ever since meeting Muzo was that it loved silence, it wanted your full attention, it enjoyed a clean place, never visited when the house was not in order. And from this, he understood that to be in constant connection with Muzo, Lusaka had to focus on his mind and continue to work on it. He recalled one teacher saying, "When the brain is silenced, the mind is clear, relaxed, and inwardly focused." When Lusaka tried silencing his mind, he would be fully awake and alert. But they did not focus his account on the external world or the events taking place around him. Silencing the mind requires an inner state that is still and one-pointed, so that the mind becomes silent, Lusaka noticed. When Lusaka's mind was calm and no longer distracted him, he noticed that with this silencing, the consciousness deepens. He also noticed that they hardly discussed anything related to the mind at the university. He learnt the part of the brain that dreams and sleeps, the vast realm of the unconscious. The reservoir of all his experiences remained unknown and undisciplined. It is not subject to any control. The entire body is in the mind, but the mind is not in the body. There is no way to exert complete control over the mind except by the practice of brain silencing. Lusaka came to think of the times he spent sitting under a mandarin tree and before he slept. Early in the mornings, as I laid in bed, thinking of nothing was silencing the mind, and came to an understanding that quieting the brain is a practical means for calming yourself, letting go of your biases and seeing what is open. It is a way of training the mind so you are not distracted and caught up in its endless churning. Silencing the mind taught Lusaka to explore his inner dimensions. It is a system of commitment, not a commandment. Lusaka was committing to himself, to his path, and to the goal of knowing himself. He thought this should be a requirement of everyone in Alkebulan if they are to win the war they did not know they were fighting. Lusaka was baffled as to which method was the best to quiet his mind without worrying about other things. After realizing that there was no right or wrong way to do it, but to concentrate on his breathing, Lusaka found that counting his breaths in sets of 1 to 5 for whatever duration he wanted helped him silence the mind more, but he couldn't keep it that way for long. It felt like waking up from a deep sleep and waking up to this new way of life and understanding curiously. Lusaka asked himself, what if each person in Alkebulan could wake up to this? It gave me a warm feeling of joy to think that each individual will have direct access to the source, rather than the earth, its material, and its people that also find their way to the cause. Lusaka and Maputo had kept contact. They checked upon each other from time to time. He always felt guilty that he did not give Maputo his fair chance or get to know each other. Time after time, Lusaka would imagine how he would have done things differently. A few months passed, and Maputo invited Lusaka to spend a week with him at his cabin. This time it did not surprise Lusaka, for he understood the power of his thoughts and realized how he took part in making this invitation happen. This was an excellent opportunity to make things right, and so Lusaka went, but they had to drive for 6 hours to get to the cabin house. Lusaka was too nervous thinking about what to talk about with just the two of them driving in a car. As Lusaka asked Cairo if she thought Lusaka should first address the elephant in the room or at least apologize. The day of the trip came. Still feeling nervous, Muzo said to Lusaka, I'm sure he'll notice how much you have grown and the person you have become. If not, there's nothing much you can do apart from showing him. As soon as Lusaka met up with Maputo, they started and the conversation kicked off. They drove with the radio off and talked for all 6 hours without a single awkward silence. Without a single word to mention what had happened between them, but deep down, Lusaka felt a sense of relief, like they had lifted a load off him. Lusaka observed that Maputo had also been on a self-discovery journey. Still, he noticed he spoke like Muzo, cementing the thought he was having and the conclusions he made up in his mind. Lusaka shared the dreams he had about Muzo, asking him to verify his thoughts. He was crazy to think this way. Without judgment, Maputo shared a story he once heard. Let us say the character's name is Lusaka in this story, right? Yeah, sure. Lusaka answered as they drove in not too far from the ocean shore, giving them a clear view of the blue skies. Maputo started. There once lived a guy called Lusaka, naming a random village. But before he was born, he lived with the Creator and many others like him. From time to time, each of them asked the Creator if they could come and visit the earth. So just like many others, Lusaka asked the Creator if he could also do the same. He said yes. The Creator then brought out a map of the islands and asked Lusaka where he wanted to go. Lusaka looked around and picked a village in Alkebulan. The Creator then said to him, for this to be possible, you will need a body in which to reside, which Lusaka chose. The Creator then said to Lusaka, you know what you need to know to complete the mission I will give you, but having a body has limitations. You will choose whatever you want, you will have free will. The only thing I can do for you is give you suggestions, but everything is your choice. Still, it's also important to remember that there are consequences for every decision you make. Still, I have given you feelings to guide you. And Lusaka said yes. The Creator then said, you can do it. It is possible, pointing to his right hand and said, he did it, you can too. For the first time in the car, Lusaka asked for a few minutes to let the story sink in, thinking about himself and Muzo, remembering when he was learning about his and his people's past. In Lusaka's tribe, there was always a firm belief that each person born into a family, clan, and tribe needs a name. They do not choose this name randomly, but with careful consideration. Family lineage plays a vital role in this decision. They believe deceased family members are nearby, and that is why they attach a name to a specific person who, at one time, dwelt among them. The presence of a dead family member is not now in the form of a human being, but as Muzo, a spirit being. Muzo's existence, the way he interacted with the living, and his behavior towards them is a manifestation of imivele, of the deceased, which Muzo carried along, and which are now tangible again in a person within the community of the living. Imibele is a transcendental heritage from Muzo. The imibele of a specific individual who lives at a specific time and in a specific group is stored within Muzo and resurrected by naming a child after their forefather. Upon reaching this understanding, he then heard a question from Muzo. From everything you have learnt about yourself, the people of Alkebulan, and the world around you, what type of group would you like to create, and what kind of world do you see now? After spending some time reflecting at the cabin in silence and taking down notes, the picture and answer to the question slowly made a full picture. Finally, after completing, Lusaka put together a statement on a piece of paper. It said, quote, I see a group that burns with hope like a candle. Its flame knows no weather or season. Our family ties are the glue that binds us together. Loyalty drives us and takes absolute pride in lighting others' paths without losing our flame. For this is our true sterling of growth and becoming better versions of ourselves. A group with the curiosity of an immature mind and afraid to take on the unknown. One who applies and learns from experience, refuses to accept the impossible, and knows that persistence overcomes resistance. In the eyes of this child, stretching from the village to the full refugee camps of Alkebulan, I see a world where struggling children no longer question their value, a world in which they fulfill their purpose and take their rightful place as citizens of this world, regardless of their upbringing. I see a world where every child will have access to clean mami water, to be able to read and develop a positive self-image. I see a world in which the community takes importance and families no longer struggle to provide for their children. A world of gold coins does not control the people, and everyone recognizes the power of small ideas. A world of opportunity and giving, where people know the Creator made them in His image, regardless of sex, color, weight, and religious affiliation. We're all equal and capable of achieving our dreams. A world where we're more than our external circumstances and features. Instead, we look inward at the content of our hearts and put love as the foundation of all our business ventures. We will have a life to fulfill the Creator's purpose for humanity. End quote. Chapter 18. Fertilization. To fertilize is to create. We mate for love and family. Happily do we stick together, forever as one, just like the Lord and the Son, one being, one love, one family. Lusaka was searching for someone with knowledge about mami water issues in Alkebulan, someone who has a full candle that will not lose its flame and wants to light others. Someone who could join him in his journey to become better versions of themselves and become the change he sought. Lusaka included Professor Horn in his list of possible coaches together with 2 other people he had spoken to that day. To Lusaka's surprise, he received a call from Professor Horn asking if he was available to meet for coffee. Yes, Lusaka responded, I am available when you are. Lusaka researched as much information about Professor Horn as he could find. He learned that Professor Horn had recently retired. Although a remarkably busy man, Professor Horn still traveled around the world to teach and attend conferences. Those he taught had reached high rankings in their careers. Lusaka ensured that he arrived early on the day of the meeting. A minute after he sat down, Professor Horn walked in. "Lusaka, right?" Professor Horn stretched out his hand for a handshake. "Come, get your stuff. I have a few others waiting outside." Lusaka stood up and followed Professor Horn outside. As always, Lusaka retreated to the place he knew best, observing and listening. Professor Horn introduced Lusaka to his friends and some of his former students who were now corporate executives and professors. "I have brought you all here so you can get to know one another," Professor Horn explained. "This one here," pointing towards Lusaka, "is my new mentee." Lusaka introduced himself and explained his project to the group. Professor Horn asked Lusaka to stay behind as everyone was leaving. "Yes, Lusaka, talk to me." Professor Horn moved closer. "And please, just call me Horn." Professor Horn asked how he could be of help to Lusaka and what he was looking for in a coach. Lusaka's thoughts spiraled as he tried to find the right words. He felt incredibly nervous. Lusaka powered through, and before the meeting finished, he found an opportunity to squeeze in the 3 questions for Professor Horn. He asked the professor about the most critical leadership lesson he had learned in his career, what he feared the most in life, and why he chose Lusaka as his mentee. Professor Horn thought quietly for a second and answered, "The most critical leadership lesson I have learned is to know oneself and to determine your destination in life to allow the journey to be a vacation." Professor Horn answered the second question. "It all depends on how you define fear. For me, it's false evidence appearing real." To your third question, I have been and done a lot of work in Alkebulan some years ago. Professor Horn explained that he and his wife went on a 4-month journey by bus along the east coast of Alkebulan from the south to the north of the island, where they visited the palace of one of the greatest kings to rule in Alkebulan. Along the route, we witnessed 2 major characteristics, Professor Horn continued. First, the people in Alkebulan seemed to have achieved considerable harmony with the surrounding environment and wildlife. Horn recounted their visit to the king's palace. The lions were so tame that you could pat them. The second thing we noticed while traveling through the 10 different islands was that every store we encountered had a non-native owner. Even though all islands were now independent, there was, and still is, a continuous dependence on outside developed economies to provide leadership and solutions for local problems, especially for providing and distributing safe mami water. Professor Horn explained that the long periods of non-native intervention at the government level left Alkebulan handicapped concerning self-determination. A further illustration of this need to put their faith into a cause was what I witnessed more recently while working on a project in one of Alkebulan's most prominent mami water bodies. My colleagues and I, said Horn, had been in a large village on lake shores for about 3 weeks when we noticed very few people in the village older than about 35 years old. On inquiring where the older people were, Horn was told that they had died of an incurable virus. Shortly after, the local clergy came strolling down the street, dressed in a white flowing gown. The residents, male and female, ran over to him and kissed the ground he walked on, seemingly as a symbol of worship to the Creator. When Horn confronted them asking, "Why are you doing this? His laws, advocating for no birth control, are causing the death of all the older people." The residents' reply was, "No sir, he is facilitating an early reunion with the Creator." This is another example that the most potent motivating force for humans is faith, be it in religion, a particular way of life or friendship, or in a nation. However, the point to remember about adhering to a cause or action driven by faith is that it makes people blind to their actions' externalities. By welcoming outsiders with their money-making ideas into their island, Alkebulan, the people have placed themselves into the slave category of humanity. Alkebulan's history is full of examples of exploitation of its native people. It is perceived that the people of Alkebulan have a broad worldview and are more sensitive to others. I see this as a weakness and is prone to exploitation. Horn paused, waiting for Lusaka to catch up as he struggled to take notes. The relationship is similar between the so-called first world woman and male. The males have evolved to charge forward and go after a single aim. not conscious of the environmental or societal damages their actions may cause. Women have evolved to work with nature to fix the damage and be exploited by men, just as the Alkebulan people have been milked by the developed world. Lusaka noted that Horn had a wealth of knowledge and ideas concerning Alkebulan and its place in the world. Now that human reach and action have become global, such behavior is no longer compatible with human sustainability on this earth. This so-called developed nations behavior, exemplified by its male population, has reached its use-by date from nature's perspective. The Western male must listen to his female partners and our Alkebulan counterparts and learn to adopt a much broader outlook about our planet's future and collaboration between nations. I should warn you, says Horn after his speech, I speak my mind, and this has got me in a lot of trouble in my career. But I just find it hard not to shine some light on the truth before trying to jump straight into finding solutions. So, how do you want to do this? They decided to meet up weekly at the coffee shop where they would work through Lusaka's Mamiwata project. Lusaka's nerves were replaced by excitement. He finally felt free to speak his mind. He realized that this was not by his doing alone. This thought quickly humbled him. He felt grateful for the opportunity. There was plenty he could learn from Horn, both in his career and a person full of wisdom and willingness to share. Horn and Lusaka met a few times after their initial meeting, but still, Lusaka would not get another chance to sit down and chat with Horn as they first did. Horn invited a host of people, usually 3 to 4 people, who discussed all kinds of business and ideas. If Lusaka felt that he had nothing of value to add, he observed and listened along. Every time Horn would ask Lusaka to introduce himself, Lusaka would become overcome by nerves. Lusaka was grateful that he had had the opportunity to brush shoulders with the most powerful men and women in Totem Island, but he felt frustrated that his mission was not progressing because his purpose was always bigger than the moment. What frustrated Lusaka the most was that everyone seemed to think he was looking for a handout every time he talked about his mission. He knew he had to find his flow to speak his mind and captivate his audience. First, he had to become a person of value and provide value. Was there a time in your life when people did not take you seriously? Lusaka asked Horn one day after their meeting. Oh yes, Horn responded. When I completed my training and became the youngest person on Totem Island to reach the highest ranking in Mamiwata training, I still had to prove myself to my father and my colleagues. After multiple meetings, Lusaka noticed that Horn's guests dominated the conversation as each one tried to get Horn's attention on a particular subject. This was not how Lusaka liked to work. He had to find alternative ways to get Horn's attention, talk about his mission, and possibly look at Lusaka's ideas. One meeting, as the table was engrossed in conversation, Lusaka noticed that everyone, including himself, only wanted what Horn had to offer. None of them paid any attention to Horn as an individual. One afternoon, Lusaka found out as much about Horn's personal life as possible. After multiple searches, Lusaka came across Horn's grandmother's notebook, which he wrote when Horn was 9 years old. Horn was a descendant of an underprivileged family belonging to a small tribe in the far mountains. His family migrated after being displaced during the war which erupted in a neighboring country and spread across the world. Millions of people died, including Horn's uncles and distant relatives. Horn's grandmother played a vital role in their community during the war by looking after people who had lost their loved ones in the camps and military conscription aimed at males aged 20 and above. In the notebook, she mentions encounters with TED 801, which she and others suffered from. She and her family later moved to Totem Island where they hoped to start afresh. After Lusaka's discovery, he decided he would no longer talk about what he is doing, but focus on building a relationship with Horn. In doing this, Lusaka had to spend as much time with Horn as possible. He decided that he would be the first one to arrive and the last one to leave their meetings. At every meeting, Lusaka ensured that he made himself available to Horn. If you need anything done or any help, I am happy to help. Lusaka noticed that Horn loved telling stories. His stories were often prompted by asking thought-provoking questions. Horn started giving Lusaka minor tasks to complete for him. Lusaka thought that Horn had too much going on as he often talked about numerous projects he was working on. One thing Lusaka noticed was that Horn was always eager to give him feedback on his work or tasks he was completing. If you're going to be my assistant, Horn said to Lusaka, your willingness to take positive criticism will be vital. Lusaka's wish had come true. He had started spending more time with Horn and helped him with tasks he needed completing. Soon the two got to know each other well. Lusaka and Horn were now meeting for lunch on specific days of the week. One day, as they sat in the sun opposite their regular coffee meeting spot, Lusaka saw the perfect opportunity to brainstorm a few ideas he had. He opened his notebook where he had drawn a few diagrams on the project he wished to set up in Alkebulan. Horn took a look at the sketches and agreed that the project is possible. He asked Lusaka to write up an argument based on his idea and back it up with research, and said, "Don't expect me to do all your work for you. You will do the work and preparations, and I'll supervise and criticize you. That way you will learn how to do it yourself." Lusaka knew that he would not complete the task all by himself, so he searched for people and experts from Alkebulan and other islands to help him bring the job to completion. During this process, Lusaka learned two key lessons. Firstly, that it took a village to raise a child. Without the help of these people, the project would not have been possible. Lusaka also learned valuable lessons about himself. He came to learn that he was great at getting things started, but terrible at completing or seeing it through. He learned that he did not make the best manager. His head was constantly in the clouds and always ran faster than those around him. This frustrated Lusaka, and so he began to focus his strengths on what he was good at doing. Soon after, Horn was approached by high-ranking Mamiwata experts to share his thoughts on the future of Mamiwata in Alkebulan. Lusaka knew the Mamiwata issues and challenges in Alkebulan well. Horn thought it would be robbery not to include Lusaka's remarks, as Lusaka had a personal understanding of the Mamiwata challenges in Alkebulan and had spent a few years researching the challenges posed by TED 801. This would also allow Lusaka to deepen his understanding and learn how experts conducted themselves in their professional settings. They recommended some solutions which empowered the people of Alkebulan first, encouraging them to look for answers from within before searching for help from outside. Chapter 19. Fetus. The fetus births a genius, a mind of the religious. Spacious months made for planning, ending up with understanding the duties of a good child. At the event of the year, Horn always gave his final talks to experts from all walks of life. Lusaka would be asked to help with preparation for the final presentation. This was a big deal for him. He now had enough knowledge and experience to sit down in a room full of experts from various fields at his former university. Being the youngest and the only one from Alkebulan, Lusaka quietly found his seat at the back of the room. While Lusaka was preparing his notebook to take notes, an elderly man pulled up a chair next to him. "Hi, young man. How are you? What's your name?" Lusaka introduced himself. "I'm Professor Kalgoorlie," the man replied. Shortly, Professor Kalgoorlie started a conversation. "Professor Kalgoorlie, I like your shirt." Lusaka: "Thank you, Professor Kalgoorlie. What does it say?" Lusaka: "Persistence overcomes resistance." Professor Kalgoorlie: "Great. Where are you from?" Lusaka: "I am from Kampanda in Alkebulan." Professor Kalgoorlie: "Oh, I know Kampanda. I was there a long time ago, way before you were born. My father was an advisor to the then colonial government. I also have a friend in Alkebulan. He was the dean at one of the universities in Alkebulan." Lusaka's inner voice: "Lord, not today." "Great. So what do you do now?" Professor Kalgoorlie: "Oh, me? Well, quite a lot. I am the head of this institute." He pointed to his name badge. "And researcher and chief advisor to another. I am also the head of this project." Lusaka: "Wow, that's impressive, Professor Kalgoorlie." A moment of silence passed between the two, and Lusaka tried focusing on the conversations occurring across the room. Then Professor Kalgoorlie continued. Professor Kalgoorlie: "You know what? It is so shameful what my people did to your people. It was pure evil. I am happy it is all over, and everyone is happy and getting along well." Lusaka: "That? Oh yes. But is it over?" Professor Kalgoorlie: "People are no longer in chains and people in Alkebulan are free." Lusaka: "Oh yes, you're definitely right about the chains. We have the independence that our ancestors fought with blood and sweat. But are the people genuinely free to be free thinkers? I think we do have independence, but not economic independence." Prof: "I would say no if you put it that way. Another moment of silence passed between the two. Professor Kalgoorlie, which department are you with? Are you one of the expert students? Lusaka, no, I am not any of the above, Lusaka said smilingly. I was invited by Professor Horn. But again, yes, I am actually a student at the School of Mysteries, Lusaka said jokingly. I want to become the change I want to see in Alkebulan. Professor Kalgoorlie, oh, you know Professor Horn? He continued, change is an overused word. Everyone has something to say about it. Lusaka, oh yes, I do, and a few others I have met through him. Have you ever drunk mami water from a well or an open source ever or recently? Prof, no, I mean, not that I can. Lusaka, you have not. Neither have I in a long time, but many people around my community and Alkebulan at large do. For starters, before we can look at implementing any changes, we first have to ensure people are in good health and strength. Professor Kalgoorlie, impressive. But your leaders are the ones to blame. They are corrupt governments who do not care about the people. Lusaka, yes. One cannot disagree that our leaders might put their pockets before the people, which it is. It is a poverty mindset, and corrupt leaders are like lemons. We can find them everywhere, just packaged differently. In my opinion, the real issue we have is identity, which leads to division. But when you ask yourself questions of division, you will find someone somewhere benefits from Alkebulan in being divided. Having leaders who don't know who they are and lead with egos, putting these first and not their legacy or people's benefits. We too, the citizens, must also admit that we do not know ourselves. As such, we elect leaders who do not know themselves. I am left with three options. Do I keep finding someone to blame? Do I sit and complain? Or will I do something? Soon the room fills and people take their seats. Professor Horn will soon start his talk. Then Professor Kalgoorlie whispers to Lusaka, let's find some time to have a chat. After reflecting on who Lusaka had met, the people he had learned from, people from all walks of life regardless of which society they lived in, what race they were, or what language they spoke, the richest and poorest, the most educated, and those who could not read or write a single word. Lusaka concluded with the thought that there were two kinds of people, those who had and were aware of the source, and those who had the source but were not aware of it. The first kind understood and worked with the Creator's principles. They were aware that security does not come from the material things they owned. They connected to the source and understood there was plenty to go around and that opportunities never run out. They dedicated their time and effort to help others achieve their goals and become better versions of themselves. They understand things came and went, so they did not attach themselves to the material side of things. They understood that everything they required was inside of them. Instead of giving their power away by blaming another, they took ownership and responsibility to build the future they wanted. They were enemies of conformity. The second kind of people were comfortable along their journey. They hold a narrow worldview. They accepted life's challenges for what they were, and they stopped learning and discovering who they were. Fear and security were the foundation for their choices. With this conclusion in mind, Lusaka came to an understanding that every society contained good and bad people, and most importantly, that not every person of his color was his brother, and not everyone of another color was his enemy. Lusaka had now become comfortable with who he was, what he had and did not have. He had challenged his story and owned his happiness. He realized that goals were essential, but not to let his happiness depend on those goals, for their joy was short-lived. Instead, he sought to enjoy the journey. Lusaka set out to discover men and women willing to join him for his challenging and difficult journey of uplifting millions of the world's impoverished into the hopes of a productive future for all humanity by ensuring no human was lost from taking mami water contaminated with TED 801. Lusaka sought men and women who were willing to go through substantial personal development and spend long months of critical thinking. He thought to make this possible, he needed people who had the curiosity of a young mind and were unafraid to challenge the unknown. Lusaka wondered where he would find such people. Muzo reminded him to start with himself and that he had everything he needed around him. All he had to do is look and pay attention. Start with that, Muzo told him. The rest will come. Lusaka looked at those close to him, people who supported him when everyone could not see his vision. The people who had put up with his complaining and offered him their time and effort. The people who had contributed to helping Lusaka find out who he was and help build the person he had become. For the first time, Lusaka was ready to stand upright and afraid to show his imperfections to his new team. In the beginning, Lusaka noticed he wanted to feel important to feed his ego, which always got Lusaka feeling jealous of what others possessed. After forming the new team, Lusaka saw the different talents and abilities that each individual brought to the team. He knew he had to make it work without limiting the strengths of others. By this time, Lusaka realized the mission at hand was greater than his fear of feeling small. The journey is not for me alone, he often thought. It is for the people. I am merely a pipe through which water passes. Upon a significant amount of reflection, Lusaka noticed that wanting to feel influential and respected was the initial driving force behind him starting the journey. He wanted to prove himself and find his place in the world. One evening as he lay in the dark, Lusaka remembered the time he was a young boy. He had gone to visit his uncle for holidays and learnt of a story of a young man who had picked up a large sum of money. This sparked an argument between his eyes, hands, feet and brain regarding who should get credit for the young man's luck. The eyes say to the hands, "It's because of me that you found the money." The hands say to the feet, "You are nothing without me." And the feet say, "Without me, none of you could have walked." The brain, listening to the argument, calmly reminds them, "I am more important than all of you." As Lusaka recounted this story, he realized that each organ's sense of importance overpowered their uniqueness and how they each contributed to a functioning body. Lusaka realized that the parts were not different, but that each of them worked in symphony towards something greater. After a long time of keeping to himself and not sharing information with his family, Lusaka finally dared to break the news to his father and mother. He thought that they would not support him or perhaps think that he was crazy. He gained the courage to tell them what he was working on and what he wanted to do with his life, to come back to Alkebulan and start working on his mission. There was not a single word of interruption as they listened to Lusaka speak. After his speech, a few seconds of silence passed. Then Lusaka's father started telling a story about the fourth longest river in Alkebulan, the East Flowing River, the longest one in the world. It covers an area of about 1.3 million square kilometers, Lusaka's father explained. Its source is in the shallow wetlands of Alkebulan, and it slowly grows and finds its way to the ocean to be one with nature, while providing mami water to one of the 7 natural wonders of the world and the world's largest man-made lake and reservoir. Lusaka listened to his father, wondering where he was going with his story. Ndola steadied his pace, explaining that the East Flowing River provides nourishment for endless wildlife. Just like us humans and our ideas, great things in nature start small. Still, through persistence, courage and determination, they grow and reach their full potential. All things in nature have greatness. They help one another fulfill their mission. That is the success you should strive for. Ndola reminded Lusaka of his grandfather's words, to never rest and to always remember that like flowers blossom, so too does man. Mwense was listening to Lusaka and his father, then added, "You need to have the faith and patience of a farmer and understand the 3 processes of farming on your new journey: cultivation, planting and harvesting. Remember, a child who knocks at a door does not do so merely once, but many times over, loud, long and shamelessly." Lusaka grew quiet. "Do not be alarmed by the perceived anger of whoever comes to open," Mwense encouraged him, "for it is dispelled by the simplicity of the disturbing little creature. So are you with the Creator. Now that you are married to your purpose and expectant with a dream, go forth and find a wife in flesh," Muzo told Lusaka. "Always carry with you your love for your first wife, for it is she who will fulfill your desires and remind you of who you will become. With her, all things are born, but without her, your journey will lack fulfillment. Always remember she is no respecter of person. She only objectifies what is in the mirror. I will tell you only one thing as you start on this journey," Muzo said to Lusaka. "Do not lose yourself in the world, for you are merely a visitor to this earth. Do not fool yourself with the length of your years. Be the author of your story, and you will not die, but live forever, for you will be born in the minds and hearts of the people every time your story is told to those who listen. Chapter 20. Birth. Every day a king is born. Only those faithful know the truth to reaching your goals. Forthright strength is developed, like a bay growing in heaven. Standing on a stage with lights blinding his eyes, Lusaka focused on the fully packed stadium of people facing him. The loud noises coming from the crowd cheer him on. "Speak! Speak!" they scream. Lusaka freezes. He is overwhelmed and unable to move. He looks down at the note cards he had prepared, hoping for it to save him. Still nervous. "Who are you?" Muzo asks Lusaka. Lusaka drowned out the noise from the audience, and he asked Muzo to join him. Slowly, they recite, "I trust myself and my abilities. I trust in the Creator. I am silent in the face of anger. I am a patient man with the ignorant, liking to calm quarrels. I am tranquil, free from impulses, who knows what is ordained to happen and awaits it in calm, peaceful, and untroubled manner. I am one who shows himself in conflicts, and who knows to avoid the words which provoke anger. I am master of myself. I am kind and friendly. I calm those who weep with words of comfort. I have a kind face for those who call on me. I help my fellow man. I can see through deceit when it occurs. My face is radiant, my hand is far-reaching, and I do not hold back for myself the food that I have. I am one who is known for the unknown, one who teaches what is useful. I am someone who listens and acts with integrity and meditates on correctness in my heart. I am someone who carries out his duty, who stays calm, free from overexcitement, and accomplishes deeds without haste. I am reliable and exact. I am confident and determined. My step is firm. My advice is excellent. I am a thinker who has taught himself what must be known. Lusaka looks up at the crowd, ready to address them, when suddenly his alarm clock wakes him. Cairo walks into the room with a cup of tea. "Everyone is here," handing Lusaka the tea. "It's time to go." The end.